question here. Do you think that Jesus thought that he had certain knowledge that the temple would be destroyed?
That Jesus, that Jesus thought that
do you think that Jesus believed that he had certain knowledge about the destruction of the temple?
No. I think the statement about the destruction, and again, let me preface this by saying that not all Open theists have to agree with my interpretation of this text. And we probably have a number out here who's like, okay. But I would say that yes, Jesus is thinking that, here I'm following N.T. Wright, if you go down this direction, if you, to the Jewish leaders, if you keep going down this path of violence, this is what's going to happen. And so it's a statement about, it's a conditional statement. I don't think the Jews had to keep going in that direction. Unfortunately, they did, so the Romans came in and destroyed Jerusalem.
So it's really conditional, even though the statement doesn't sound very conditional?
Well, no.
Like a flat prediction?
No, Jonah doesn't sound conditional either. The prophecy in Ezekiel is not conditional. The prophecy in Daniel 11 isn't conditional. And none of those came to pass at all. So, just because Walter Kaiser, who is my colleague and my former professor, says that most of the statements of prophecy in the Hebrew Bible are unstated conditionals.
Right, and I would grant you certainly that a lot of the biblical, or some of the biblical language and some of the prophecies are conditional. Jonah's in the case of that. Grant you that. But I'm going back to Jesus, though. But when Jesus says to Peter, before the cock crows 3 times, or when the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times. Do you think that Jesus believed that he was making a prediction?
I think, well, in my case, I say that he's making a warning. He's telling you, this is what's going to happen. If you keep going this path, okay, he's judging his character, where he's been at spiritually, and he's saying, you're headed for the falls. You need to turn around or get over the side because you're going to go over. And if Peter had taken the warning, then the biblical writers, I think we'd have a different biblical text.
Do you think that Jesus believed that it was certain that one of his disciples would betray him?
Well, the predictions, the quote predictions about Judas, I don't believe are predictions from the Hebrew Bible. Okay, here, much like Matthew 2:15, quoting Hosea, out of Egypt I called my son. You go back and read Hosea, it's not a prediction at all. It's actually historically talking about the Exodus event. That the New Testament writers are making use of these themes and ideas in the Hebrew Scripture whenever they see that Jesus is recapitulating, that he's redoing what was in the Hebrew Bible text. And that's not just to move open theistic. I mean, I'm not right.
Do you think it was certain that Jesus would be born in Bethlehem?
Well, an open theist can go 2 ways. And one could say, yes, because God said, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to bring it about in Bethlehem. And then God would have to be either remove somebody's free will or be very resourceful to bring it about that that's the case. Or you could say, well, that isn't a prediction of a future event. That's actually talking about something that happened in the Old Testament times. And again, it's picked up by the New Testament writers to recapitulate. Jesus is a recapitulation of those kinds of events.
Okay, let's go to the audience now for questions and answers. All right, so I'll just look for hands and call on folks. And if I don't know your name, I'll point at you. So we'll start up here in the front with TC. When you ask your question, would you address it to one or both of the folks up here?
Sure. My question is for Dr. Davis. When you used the example of David and Bathsheba, and you talked about your view of a posteriori bilateral determination,
right.
You talked about how God would co-sign the desires of the human or override them. But if God had indefinite future foreknowledge, wouldn't he already know his response before that ever happened? And wouldn't he be limited then to respond the way he foreknew he would respond?
No, because God is free. God can let David, go ahead and commit adultery, and so that David and all the rest of us can, learn a very valuable moral lesson. Or, God could have intervened to change the inner motivational structure of David's inner psychology. So I can't predict unless I've got some predicted prophecy in Scripture as to what God might do. But I think it's hard to account for a lot of the biblical data without saying that the God of the Bible, and I think the God of Jesus and Paul, certainly does actually, quote, choose to override what we're now calling here libertarian freedom for his own purposes.
Can I follow up? But wouldn't that make his response in time versus before time?
Well, my view is that God is both within time but not limited to it. So that I think one classical view is to say that, well, God is, no analogy is perfect here, but time is like the line. The line is inside the big circle. Time is one dimension, the circle is two dimensions here, and that God can see both the beginning of the line, the middle of the line, and the end of the line. Because God knows all creatures, including time, because God upholds through his concurrence all things in reality. In him we live and move and have our being, as Paul says in Acts 17. So every motion, every thought, every neural firing here is only done with the concurrence of the Creator God. I think that God does certainly delegate a substantial amount of creativity and freedom to the human agent. But I think the biblical God says in some cases, I think I'll step in and redirect the course of events. Other times God says, well, let's let it run, and we're going to take that pathway. Back to the dinosaurs, in terms of subhuman agency, did God know the apparently random course of development of biological life?
Actually, we're going to let them ask.
Oh, okay.
Bill.
Yeah. Your own view of freedom remains somewhat murky
Is
because
this
you're
who
mainly...
you name is?
sorry, Dr. Davis. You were mainly interested in attacking John. I'm not quite clear. You said it just a minute ago that God sometimes overrides what we're calling libertarian freedom. Now, that sounds as if people have libertarian freedom to begin with, but I'm not sure I don't think that's what you actually believe. Let me put it this way. You say, okay, there are these tendencies in a person which God, may choose to let run or may override them. Well, okay, where did the tendencies come from? Is this somehow the consequence of the way the person was created, or was it the person's own choice to some extent that got them sort of headed in that direction? And was it really in the person's power to have not gone in that direction? I mean, if you take that view, then you are subscribing to libertarian freedom. But it sounds to me like the tendencies are the consequence of the way the person was created and their environment and so on. But I'd really appreciate if you clarified that.
Well, I guess philosophically, I'm a sort of a modified version of reformed compatibilism, and that's why I've tried to explain that difference here. But certainly I wouldn't deny the fact that, in my view, human beings have, substantial human freedom, but not unlimited human freedom, because a lot of our choices are certainly conditioned by our previous choices. And previous choices you've made in terms of, what substances that you put in your body and so forth may limit your ability to make a healthier choice the next time. So I think that even, libertarian freedom here to recognize at the psychological level, our previous choices may limit our choices in the future. So I think that neither of us would look at human agents as being, totally determined robots. And I'm trying to fend off a view, a certain view of God, but that's not my view.